Environment Committee. Today we're covering the operating budget and a number of capital budget items. And the first item today is a budget briefing from WMATA. So we're very much looking forward to that. I'm sure my colleagues have many questions. There's a lot going on at WMATA, especially after the last several months, and very excited to hear about your plans for the coming months. So, Chris, welcome. Is this your first time?
It is.
It's a unique committee. Okay, we prepared a lot of hard questions for you.
Hopefully I'm ready.
Good.
Well, good afternoon, Chairman Hucker, Councilmember Glass, and Councilmember Reamer. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Chris Zappi. I was honored last November to be appointed to serve on the Washington Suburban Transit Commission and as an alternate member of the WMATA board. I'm pleased to be here to provide an update on the FY23 budget. And I'm joined here by Charlie Scott, Metro's Government Relations Officer for Maryland. So first, I'd like to thank you for the trust that you've placed in me to represent the county on the WSTC and on the WMATA board. I believe in public transportation and the essential service it provides to people and communities. I'm a rider of our mass transit systems. I live in Kensington with my wife and my son, and I rely on public transit for my commute to downtown DC. I take DC Metro, Mark Brunswick line, ride on bus, and I know how important those services are. And so I'm looking forward to today's presentation and discussion. I understand we're targeting about 10 minutes for the presentation portion of this. So I'll flip through the slides.
Sure, that sounds good. And I should just check, do my colleagues have any opening comments?
Welcome.
I should
have. Thank you. Sorry.
Or Dr. Orlin, anything? So far, so good? Okay.
Okay.
We're on schedule.
Okay, thanks.
Well, I don't know about that, but yeah.
All right, so today we're hoping to cover a few items, the pandemic's impact on Metro, the FY23 operating budget, Metro capital program update, and then closing with some of the challenges and opportunities facing the system and the region. First, we're really proud of the service that Metro employees have provided over the last 2 years. Staff on the front lines have reported to work every day to keep the region running, provided safe, reliable service to anyone who needed to travel, especially essential workers. Very quickly, WMATA rolled out a program that included top-to-bottom cleaning of every station, hand sanitizers for customers. They've given out more than 2.7 million masks and counting, and we're following TSA guidance on masking for customers and employees. And we've also partnered with jurisdictions, including Montgomery County, to provide vaccinations for employees, and we're grateful for that partnership. That's led to 93% of our workforce being vaccinated, and 97% are compliant with our policies that require either vaccination or regular testing. On slide 5, we have a chart showing the Metro ridership, and we're seeing riders return just like transit agencies are seeing across the country. We're projecting 34% of pre-pandemic ridership in FY22, and the FY23 budget assumes 53% of pre-pandemic ridership. On slide 6, I know you all have been following the Blue Line derailment that occurred in October 7th.
Okay. Questions as you go?
However you'd like to proceed. We can go.
That's a little. Do you mind going back one?
Yeah, sure, of course.
5. Yeah, good. You numbered your slides.
Yeah.
53% by next year of pre-COVID levels. How does that match up to other jurisdictions?
That is that's something we could follow up with you all in writing, but I think it's comparable to other transit agencies across the country that they saw 20-30% of ridership during the pandemic, and it's been coming back.
Charlie,
for the record, Charlie Scott with Metro. So what we've seen, especially with us and then with other transit systems, the more bus-heavy transit systems have not had the same ridership losses, and bus, for us, we're in the mid-60s. I've seen other transit systems that are 70s, 80% right now of bus ridership compared to pre-pandemic. On the rail side, we are more comparable with other systems, but I would say slightly lower. I think that's partly because of our reliance on the federal workforce, which I think has been slower to come back to the workplace than other sectors.
Do you have a slide coming where it's bifurcated between rail and bus ridership?
We don't have a slide, but we could get that to you.
Yeah, it would be nice to know LA versus Boston, Philly, Chicago, right? Like you said. Okay, thanks.
Thanks. So the next slide, just a brief update on the 7000 series rail cars. We're continuing to work with the NTSB and the Washington Metro Rail Safety Commission and have hired a safety consultant to provide additional expertise. Subject to timely approvals from the WMSC, WMATA staff have laid out a plan to return 6,000 series cars next month and 7,000 series cars by the end of the summer. The 6,000 series, the additional 6,000 series cars will enable Metro to improve green and yellow service to 15-minute headways in May, and then the 7,000 series will return gradually, leveraging new technology for wheel inspections. But we expect and hope that that will happen this summer. So right now, just to recap, services operating at 10-minute headways during the week and 12-minute headways during the weekday or weekend, and then the budget, which we'll turn to in a minute here, assumes 5-minute headways during the peak period, 6-minute headways off peak, and 10-minute headways at night, at late night. So turning to the FY23 operating budget, a substantial communications effort took place to collect feedback from around the region on the proposed budget.
Go
ahead.
Interrupt you.
Yep, sorry.
Could you go back, please?
Yep.
Just wanted to say we're grateful that the red line's running every 10 minutes. It looks like we're the only line in the system that's running every 10 minutes.
Yeah, we fought for that.
I suppose there's more duplication in the other lines, so maybe it's an equivalent, roughly equivalent.
Yeah, I think that the reason why is because we don't have the benefit of other lines converging to provide that trunk service in downtown.
So maybe it's not so intentional. All right.
Yeah.
I'm not feeling so special anymore. Never mind. But I still appreciate it.
We've had shorter headways than the other lines for quite a while.
Yeah.
But have you heard any discussions, proposals of restoring turnbacks as a budget saving?
I have not heard anything about that. I know that's incredibly important.
We don't want to see that. Okay, good.
For that,
Good.
yeah. But I think, Councilmember Reamer, to your point, whereas other lines don't have 10-minute headways at the very end of the line that we do here. So there are some differences there.
10-minute headways is probably better than most people think. I think there's a perception right now that the headways are much longer than that. So 10 minutes is not so different than what folks were used to
Yeah.
before.
Yeah. So turning to the budget, as I was saying, we went through a really substantial communications effort to collect feedback, used social media, digital, radio, print ads in multiple languages. There's an online customer survey, signage at all stations, bus stops and vehicles, email communication to more than 4,000 stakeholders, 3 public hearings, and that resulted in 3,000 public comments collected. And thank you to everyone who provided really important feedback to WMATA and the board. And so that on slide 10 here, the approved budget is going to require $700 million in federal assistance to close the gap as a result of the reduced revenue. And I think that you all know what's on the horizon is that preliminary estimates project an operating budget gap of $300 to $400 million in FY24, which is greater than the remaining federal relief funding. And that's going to be a huge challenge that the board and the jurisdictions are going to have to come together to work together to address very soon.
Is that secure, the $700 million?
Yes, yeah. So we have that federal relief funding. It will provide that gap. It'll cover that gap.
Headways are thanks to $700 million of federal relief funding.
Yeah, it's really an essential stopgap to provide the service that we're providing today.
And so I'll jump in. The follow-up to that is how much longer can we expect that type of federal subsidy?
So there's after FY23, there would be about $150 million left in federal subsidy for FY24. And so that leads to that $300 to $400 million gap based on what we're projecting on the ridership side.
So a precipitous drop, but there's still $150 million or so.
There is still some federal funding that we expect would be available. Is there anything you want to add, Charlie? On that?
That's right. Okay. Yep. And that's based on the appropriations as they are written today, right? Federally.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. So we also understand that there was interest to discuss the fare policies that were approved in this budget. So I'll turn to that now. First, the budget continues fare changes that were adopted in September, the weekend flat fare of $2, free bus transfers to rail through a $2 bus rail transfer discount, $12 7-day regional bus pass, which saves riders about 20%. And then there were new fare initiatives that were adopted here, $2 late night rail fare to encourage ridership, support workers with later shifts and people traveling at night. On slide 13, discounting the monthly passes retains the convenience of a pass and makes it more equitable to riders who may be traveling fewer days per week. And similarly, the 7-day unlimited pass will be discounted as well, providing similar flexibility to riders who may not be traveling as frequently as they once did. And then the add value bonus was considered but not approved as part of the budget process.
We have millions watching at home. Can you explain what that means?
Oh, yeah. So the add value bonus, essentially, if you were purchasing a $25 Smart Trip card, an additional $5 would be added to that card as part of your purchase.
Like a bulk discount.
Yeah, sort of an incentive to refill, to buy a $25.
I mean, it's a throwback to the $20 card back in the day. Fondly remember, buy a $20 card and you get the 10%, the $22. Yeah.
And then just to be clear, that of course was not approved as part of this budget. Moving to the capital program, Metro has improved over the years in its ability to deliver on the capital plan. That's resulted in a reduction in the state of good repair backlog, essentially the size of overdue work. Oh, sorry, just shown on this slide. The backlog, in 2016, the backlog was estimated to be $7 billion, but after significant investment by WMATA and the historic regional funding commitment by the jurisdictions, the backlog has continued to be addressed. After the investments included in the FY22 to FY27 plan, we expect the backlog will decrease to about $3.2 billion and then further decrease to $1.2 billion after the plans that go through fiscal year 2031. The next slide has a 1-minute video that we can try to play if that is okay with you all. I'm impressed that worked after 2 years away. That's great. So just to highlight.
100 social media posts?
Yeah.
I think it's got to be much more than that.
Well, I think, did it say 1 million engagements with social media posts?
It may have just been the capital.
Okay.
Okay.
Right. I think that was the capital program focused.
Great.
Okay.
So,
Gotcha.
yes, we're on social media every day.
Right. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, fine.
So just to highlight one of the recent capital projects in Montgomery County, as you all know, the canopy at the Rockville Station, which was constructed in 1979 and reached the end of its useful life, so a replacement project began in the fall that shut down the Rockville and Shady Grove stations, which we know is a big inconvenience, and we appreciate riders' patience during that project, especially since the reopening had to be delayed to bring additional trains into service from the Shady Grove rail yard to address the rail car shortage caused by the 7000 series fleet removal. But while that project was under construction, we used that time to make several other improvements. At Rockville Station, the park and ride was repaved and new fare gates were installed. At Shady Grove Station, the platform canopy, roof, and escalators underwent repairs, and then at Metro was also able to perform safety-critical work on the tracks between Shady Grove and Rockville stations, repairing the signal system, performing track maintenance, and switch machine replacement. With the stations now open, hopefully some of you have seen the new, more efficient LED lights, the upgraded speaker system for station announcements, new digital screens that are much clearer, and new security cameras are there as well. And then moving to the next slide. So the FY23 capital budget of $2.3 billion will further address the capital backlog and advance several critical projects, including completing final phase of the platform improvement program and making major repairs to the Yellow Line Bridge and tunnel. And of course, the point of this is all to deliver a safer and more reliable system, and the performance metrics demonstrate that to be the case, and that we're improving. And there's still a ways to go, especially given the 7000 series matter. But when you look over the last few years, since 2015, 2016, a lot of progress has been made. And lastly, just stepping back, we know we face real headwinds as a system and an industry, some of which we've already talked about. And we need to consider and continue to consider whether we're serving people and communities as best as we can given changing travel patterns. And even before the pandemic, high quality transit was not consistent across the region. So as we look forward, we need to make sure that all the people in our region benefit from safe, reliable, and frequent service. And we really appreciate your support of Metro and for the opportunity to be here today. And we're looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Terrific, thank you. You answered a number of my questions. Has WMATA done any fiscal analysis of not just the cost of moving to free bus fares, as we have and Alexandria has, but what that would do to ridership and what you might capture in rail ridership, Farebox?
You have thoughts on that?
I don't think we've done a recent analysis. One thing that we are partnering with the District of Columbia on is actually an upcoming fare trial for low-income residents. And that's going to test out providing a 50% off discount and also free transit. So that trial will be launching. They have actually begun enrolling some participants, and then they'll keep enrolling for the next couple months and then launch that early this summer. So that's going to be a 9-month trial. So we'll work with the district to analyze the ridership patterns from that trial.
Interesting. What's the eligibility level and how do you?
And so it's income-based eligibility, and actually they're working with their Department of Energy and Environment. So families that are eligible for the low-income heating energy assistance program are the ones who are being contacted, and other energy assistance programs, but LIHEAP being the primary one.
Building off that database of residents.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
So,
and what's the income eligibility for LIHEAP eligibility?
I don't have that off the top of my head, but it's, but I can get back to you on that.
Sure. Okay. Does WMATA believe we could move toward all-day $2 fares with the surcharge pricing, or no?
I'm sorry, all day $2 on rail?
Yeah.
Not with our current, I mean that would require significant more subsidy.
Sure, right, okay. And did you want to comment at all on, obviously the council led by Councilmember Bremer has done a lot of work to encourage developers to develop at our big surface parking lots on the Red Line. Can you update us on what WMATA is doing to get more low to moderate income housing, partnering with HOC or other developers in those areas?
So we do have a couple recent announcements that we've worked with Amazon. So Amazon has helped support projects at both New Carrollton and College Park. And then, generally, our projects fall under local zoning. So whatever the localities require is what our joint developers develop to.
Are there suggestions you have for us to make more local zoning changes to encourage this? That's obviously a priority for the council, the county. We have a housing crisis, and you have a revenue shortage that this would be a great long-term, partial solution for, right?
I mean, generally, anything that brings more, more housing opportunities right to our metro stations is what we want to support, and definitely affordable housing being a critical part of that mix. So, I mean, anything to further accelerate development at our stations and adjacent to our stations. I mean, anything within the watershed of our stations, we encourage that, as well as commercial development, especially as you go out to the ends of the line. We want to see mixed uses, We run primarily empty trains out, in the morning, and, if we could, have some of those seats filled with riders going to jobs, that'd be great.
Yeah, we all support that goal. So there's no news.
No. I mean, no news. I think the only news would be the recent announcements with Amazon.
Right.
So that was key funding to help those deals pencil out.
Yeah, right. Nothing in my current today. Yes, Councilman Reamer.
Great, thank you. We did see some exciting announcements from Metro about your 10-year development strategy and a number of stations around the region that are on your priority list for redevelopment. And there are several in the county that are on your priority list. I guess the question I had is, if you receive an unsolicited proposal from a county department or agency or from the private sector, how does that affect that that strategy? Because, like, for example, I think Forest Glen was fairly late in your anticipated prioritization timing, but I think there's possibilities that we could move more quickly at a station like Forest Glen, first of all. I do want to say I'm excited about the Amazon partnership with WMATA. I think it's phenomenal, and noting that one of the sites that was identified is Grosvenor. So the Grosvenor financing strategy to move that development forward, which relies on the property tax incentive that the council adopted, will also, their financing strategy includes Metro, and so, Amazon, and so they will be buying down housing and reducing the rent at housing there from what it would otherwise be. So that's, a win-win as far as I can tell. But if there is a site that's not on, how might that affect? Will Metro, will you help us get Metro to pivot or just kind of take advantage of the opportunities as they arise and not be too rigid about the timing of when a project might be, get the resources to move forward?
Yeah. Well, first, thanks for mentioning the 10-year strategic plan. I think it's exciting to see something like that issued to talk about there's really so much potential, and Metro actually has the largest joint development program of any transit agency across the U.S., and it's something that we should continue to build on. And I think, as you saw in the plan, market readiness and other environmental conditions affect the prioritization, and I think if those circumstances change, the plan would need to change as well. And I agree that Forest Glen, which is sort of my home station as well, is a huge untapped opportunity. And there, for example, already about 40% of people walk to the station, and you can only imagine that would be a lot higher if we had more and good housing right there. And part of the plan, which is also worth mentioning, is that it reassesses the infrastructure that's already there. So Forest Glen is a good example where we may not need, and we probably don't need, as many parking spaces there based on the use during the pandemic, before the pandemic, and that's the type of thing that also gets reevaluated throughout this process.
Great. Well, I wanted to make a general observation here, which is these budget numbers are terrifying. The fact that our system is only at the level that it is thanks to a $700 million federal subsidy. The federal government is going to have to continue to subsidize transit agencies across the country at a level unlike we have ever experienced. And I don't know if that is, what the prospects for that are. But if that funding or a lot of it goes away, we're going to have a very difficult conversation about service and how to maintain service. And it's at risk of putting Metro into a death spiral where, that phrase is often used for transit systems where service isn't frequent enough, and so folks who would otherwise ride it just stop riding it, and then that produces less revenue, and then that causes the service to become less frequent, and then more people stop riding it, and it's really, that's why I mentioned, well, right now it's 10-minute headways. That's pretty good. Like, I think there might be a lot of commuters out there who do not realize that it's just 10 minutes now on weekdays, and it's safe to come back. But we're please keep your advocacy forward on the funding, as I know you are, and the county ought to be helping in any way possible to keep that federal support going, because, you know, clearly in the wake of COVID and the shift to these new work arrangements, there's just going to have to be a completely different financial strategy for transit. And it's I was just marveling, like, who would have thought that a massive shift to telework would actually cause transit to crater and not reduce driving? That's like the situation. We've been all talking about telework as a climate solution because it would reduce driving, and it actually hasn't. Driving is steady, and it's transit that has taken the fall. And so there's a lot of riders to be brought back, I believe. And I know that there are many people who are driving 1 or 2 days a week. They will come back to transit if they feel that the service is good and it's safe. And it's just a habit. They've been in a habit for driving for 2 years. I think that's a lot of the problem. A lot of those choice riders or drivers, they've been in the habit of just driving everywhere by themselves for 2 years because of the pandemic, and we've got to coax them back. And you know, they got to know that the service is reliable and it's safe. So you know, that's a big job. Thank you.
I completely agree. Thank you.
Councilman Glass?
Sure. Good afternoon. It's good to see everybody and all those attending as well. So I appreciate the conversation, the comments, and the presentation. I have a few observations and then questions as well. First, Mr. Scott, I'm intrigued by the means testing that DC is trying to do with LIHEAP. I know that when we had looked at ways to incentivize more ridership last year, over the last few years, it was that means testing, identifying, and processing that seemed difficult. We will have a conversation about that later in this hearing, so I'll put a pin on that now. But appreciate you sharing with us what our colleagues across Eastern and Western Avenue are doing. Picking up the conversation regarding the WMATA properties and the construction, the housing on top of them. When I saw the news and saw the locations of the stations, Montgomery County wasn't really in the hunt there. There were other jurisdictions that, from my observation, were either higher up the list, and you'll probably say there wasn't a delineated list, but there were more opportunities in Montgomery County that weren't presented. If my observation is correct, can you share with me why that might be?
Councilmember Glass, are you speaking to the 10-year plan specifically?
Yeah.
So as Mr. Zappi mentioned, I mean, it was based on market readiness. So we have, you know, a couple stations that are basically in our, you know, immediate ready to go. So that's White Flint / North Bethesda and Grosvenor. And then in the next station, the next list, we would have, again, White Flint, North Bethesda, and Twinbrook. And then beyond that is where we see Forest Glen, Rockville, Silver Spring, Twinbrook again on the east side, and Wheaton really being ready. But again, this is a list that's based on when we think the market is going to be ready, when other infrastructure is going to be ready to support that development. And these are all stations that are, and categories that can move. So if you know, there's a developer who wants to do something more quickly at a station, and they come to us, that can move, you know, one of these stations up the list, you know, into the more ready to go category. So I wouldn't necessarily, I mean, it's supposed to be, it's a 10-year plan, but it's not laid out, you know, in 2027, we'll be doing exactly this.
Well, so the question wasn't so much a critical one, but more a genuine question, right? And you started hinting at as to why that was, about market readiness, about other geographic and other rationale. But is cost one of those issues? Is the high cost of construction at these sites? I'm just trying to probe it a little further.
I think you have to get down station by station to look at what we are facing at different stations. You know, one that we had mentioned already was Forest Glen, and the county has a project there to do the pedestrian underpass. So obviously that makes the station safer, but also one other ancillary benefit, as Chris mentioned, replacement parking is one of the largest costs of making our surface lots ready for development. And we know that there are some people who drive to that station who don't live that far away. And if they had a safer way to cross Georgia Avenue to get to that station, they could walk.
Absolutely.
So, and then that would decrease the demand for parking, and that would make that station more developable.
Right. Well, and it's a broader conversation, a regional conversation that needs to be had, but it is because of the lack of development at the sites you mentioned and others here in the county, which is why a number of years ago I proudly supported Councilmember Reamer's proposal to incentivize, because if we want these types of investments, if we want these types of properties, and they weren't happening, we have to ask why, which is part of why I'm trying to probe here, right? Because in addition to or to supplant whatever we've done here in the county, there's more that we can do. And so I appreciate the open dialogue and the spirit in which I asked those questions. Two other comments. One, I also concerned about the 80% drop in federal support that will come next year from nearly 700 million to 150 or so. We got to talk to our federal delegation, and hopefully the climate on Capitol Hill will be a receptive one to supporting the federal workforce and supporting the surrounding jurisdictions. But it is a scary prospect as we're trying to come on the rebound to have an 80% cutoff from federal funding. So something I know that we will lend our collective voices to, probably with our regional partners. And then so last comment regarding regional partners and regarding WMATA. Mr. Zappi, welcome to the board. And so I'm curious, with new leadership afoot, not only you, but at the top, with General Manager Wiederfeld leaving soon, I'm curious from your perspective, what do you think the most challenging aspects of that job will be for whomever it is that takes it?
Yeah, well, first, thank you for the welcome, and I'm looking forward to continuing to work with you and the rest of the council. So I think that there's a few challenges. The immediate challenge is the return of the 7000 series trains and delivering safe and reliable and frequent service to the region. That's what, as you all have pointed out, that's what's going to get people back on transit, is good service. That's number one. Stepping back, I think the financial situation is ultimately going to be the challenge over the next few years. Part of how you respond to the first one and trying to win riders back is going to affect what we can do when it comes time to deal with the FY24 budget. But I think the hope is that the person that comes in is really experienced, understands the industry, understands transit, and will be able to steward the system over the next few years through those challenges. And then, things like the joint development efforts that sets the system up for the long term. And then continuing to look at and invest in the infrastructure, I think is sort of underlying all of this is something that's important for the long-term success of the system.
Well, I'm glad you shared all those perspectives of what you're looking for, because we will need all of that in whoever the next general manager is. But the way you put it, I absolutely agree. Whomever takes this position, with the support of the board and support of staff and all the regional jurisdictions, at the end of the day, we'll be tasked with creating a system where we have good, safe, reliable transit.
Right.
And so long as we continue our public commitment towards that, people will return, the system will operate as was intended, and will chart a path to better regional transit. So thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Do you know which systems are doing the best job of winning back riders?
That's a good question.
Or what the best practices are? What's working?
I think as I think Councilmember Reamer, you mentioned the transit death spiral. I think that's avoiding that by providing good service, like that is what is working. I don't know if you have other thoughts, Charlie.
But like New York has the highest rail ridership, right? Were they hit the hardest during the pandemic? Are they suffering even more than WMATA is, or less? And have they done anything effective to bring everybody back?
I think it's tough to compare systems like that, but I think they're suffering from the same challenges that we are in terms of trying to win riders back. Their traffic is as bad as it ever has been in the city when they have plenty of, they have a large and dense network and subway and bus systems.
Silver Spring and Shady Grove used to always have our highest ridership, right, on the red line. Is that still the case? And have ridership patterns changed over the last couple of years?
Looking at Maryland overall, I think that the reduction in riders has mirrored the system overall. I don't know if you have information on the specific stations.
No, sorry, not on the specific stations, but yes, it's right that overall Maryland almost identically matches the system average overall. Slightly less drop in ridership in Maryland, so and in Montgomery than the system average. And so your question also about where we rank, again, every system is unique. So I think when you look at like Mark Rail, for instance, Mark Rail has had a more significant drop than us. Some people consider Metro Rail to be somewhat of a hybrid because we do provide some pretty long distance trips into the system. So I think it's difficult to compare us to other systems. I think the ones that are more focused on downtown cores have probably fared somewhat better because they're also serving leisure trips and other non-commute related trips. So again, I think it's hard to do an apples to apples comparison, but we can try to get back to you on, other system comparison.
Just curious. It seems like
no, absolutely.
Like an environment in which we ought to be using all the creative thought we can and picking up on any success stories and mirroring that behavior because all these systems are facing the same kind of challenges, right? Anybody else on this? Okay, Dr. Orlin. Oh yeah.
Just last thing. Thank you, Councilmember Glass, for just sort of more fully addressing the development opportunities. And as was said, we established this significant property tax incentive for development of metro stations for high-rise. We're already seeing results at the White Flint station, not the property right on 355, but the section that's off 355 had a low or mid-rise project that was moving forward, and with the council's property tax incentive went to high-rise, so that's really exciting. Grosvenor is moving forward, and we're thrilled by that, and we're glad that Amazon's partnering with that. And as Evan said, we'd like to see some more county stations, early in the delivery, and so hopefully we can make that a priority, and certainly look to you, Mr. Zappi, to maybe we can sit you down with HOC, for example, if you haven't had a chance already. I'm sure you know them well, and hear about some of their plans, and find other ways to. It sounds the way that Charlie described it. It sounds like whoever's moving fastest and most successfully is going to get the engagement at WMATA to move forward, because there's a 10-year plan, but it's a flexible plan based on market response. So we could help be part of moving that response more quickly. So we'll follow up on that. Thank you.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. Is there anything else we could be doing to prioritize stations in Montgomery County on the red line? I mean, years ago, GM Wheatfield said to me, "Oh yeah, write a letter in support of Forest Glen," and we've done that over and over with the state senators and whatever, saying, "Hey, focus on this," because he would say, we have a limited bureaucracy of real estate folks focused on this, and the more pressure we get from the jurisdictions, the more it's going to elevate those individual projects. But is there anything else we could be doing?
I mean, I think to Charlie's point, I think looking at the market conditions, I mean, that whatever you all can do to along that front, that changes sort of the context that we're in at the station level. I think that could be helpful, and we can get back to you with any other ideas.
Okay, great.
And Councilmember, I mean, in your district, I know that there's a planning effort underway on Silver Spring. Yes. Obviously, our plans there have been delayed somewhat by the Purple Line. Our land is the staging area for the Purple Line project, and also our land was cut up a little bit by the revised Purple Line alignment. But still, I mean, any ideas that you and the community have for something iconic there on the remaining parcel would be interesting to see what we could do with our remaining parcel there.
We have ideas.
And we're now providing you with adequate height. I think the plan we have is 300 feet or so. If you need more than that, let us know while we're working on it, and adequate density. So that's hopefully a step in the direction. So
Do you need more than that?
let us know. We'd love to see a 500-foot building there.
Okay, great. If there are no other questions, thank you so much for coming down. Mr. Zapp, it's great to have you.
Thanks so much.
And yeah, thanks for representing us. Okay, thanks, Charlie. You're not excused. You have to stay. We didn't turn on the heat, though. Welcome, Emil. Okay, next we have transportation fees, fares, and fines, and DOT Mass Transit Fund. Dr. Orland, thank you for your terrific packet.
Thank you. And I'll point out on my mistakes as I go through. The first item is the Mass Transit Fund budget. The executive is recommending an increase of about 12% over FY22. Before we get into the specifics, just to remind you what the council president has asked staff to do, which is to identify either outright reductions or deferrals of some spending to essentially make room for other council priorities such as OPEB, to the ability to add things that are not in the executive's budget with money, and also this concern about sustainability of the budget moving forward, because a lot of the revenue that the executive is recommending are really one-time revenue, but he's building it into with items which are really continuing. So you'll see a few of those in here. The first area I want to talk about is the restoration of ride-on service. Prior to COVID, we were at 20.5 million riders per day, per year, on the system. Obviously, we're down quite a bit. Actually, in this fiscal year, we're down 24% from that level, and we will be down, still even with the growth, down by 12% in next year, according to DOT's figures and their forecasts. In May, next month, the department's going to be adding back some more bus service. It's going to bring it to 90% of pre-COVID service in terms of the number of revenue hours of service there is out there. And in July, it's going to go up again to 94%. And in September, some more changes to bring it up to 97%. And the budget for FY23 assumes all of that. It also assumes that in January, there'll be the final slug getting back to 100%. My recommendation here is not to fund that last increase in service. Bring it to just basically budget it so we have 97% of service in FY23, corresponding again to about 88% of the pre-COVID ridership. So this will be more service growth compared to ridership growth. The savings would be about $2.1 million. And you could come back and revisit this next January when you get a more updated figure as to what the revenue picture is generally in FY23, and decide that if you can afford to add back the other 3%, the next opportunity to do it would be next May, or May of 2023, and you could do it at that point. And if the revenues are not any better than they look right now, then you could think of it in terms of the FY24 budget, but essentially deferring that. So that's my first recommendation, is to reduce the proposed budget by literally $2,128,452.
Colleagues?
Sorry, I'm just catching up here. Why don't we hear from the executive branch about it, perhaps? I don't know.
Do you want to elaborate?
Yeah, I think that would be
Recommendation.
useful. I mean, the county executive supported restoring the full ride-on service by the end of the year that we had pre-pandemic, and ridership is clearly a factor in the amount of service you would provide on a system, but it is by no means the only factor. We are restoring service to match where ridership is occurring, and also trying to achieve more reasonable headways in some of our neighborhood serving routes. And we would like to continue on that as it makes transit a better mode for people to access employment and make other trips, because they can plan more easily and have a little bit more flexibility in their travel times. And there's a significant impact on people who have no choice but to use transit, and also are perhaps chaining their travel to a job with other responsibilities like childcare, shopping, et cetera, to have greater frequency, even if the ridership is not at the level that it was before, that in theory was justifying that level of frequency. So we would like to see us continue to make progress towards working back towards that level of service we had in 2019, although the final version of that will not look like the route pattern and sequence we had before the pandemic. We would be providing the service that's needed both for those areas where the ridership is recovering more quickly and getting the headways back to where they need to be for people to use this as a reasonable commute mode for their trips. And I'd just like to note, I mean, we're looking at a packet here today that is in some ways not directly but indirectly pitching service cuts against fare policy. This is exactly the type of scenario we are concerned about, because the tax-supported revenue is competing against a whole host of other priorities, whereas fare-generated revenue is fare-generated revenue used directly to support the service. So maintaining that diversity of revenue streams is important to hedge against these types of situations when one source or another is under pressure. So we would strongly recommend against not adopting this recommendation and not cloud the water on future conversations about fare policy with the idea that we're cutting service at the same time we're changing our revenue generation through fares. So that's my position on that anyway, and happy to entertain other discussion with the committee.
Thanks. So I'd like to just understand this a little bit better. So you have a service expansion plan for May.
Correct. We are stepping from the current service level back towards what was the service level pre-pandemic.
And with that, you will be at 90%. So it's 90% of your service level. It's not necessarily 90% of your ridership, but it's 90% of your service level.
Correct.
That's now. I mean, the
Well,
budget.
we're presently at 90%.
We'll be going 90% with the May pick.
We'll be going to 90% with the May
I think
pick.
it's May, July.
Well,
July is
July goes at
94%.
94%. September goes to 97%. And only the last bit in January, which is what I'm recommending not doing, gets you to 100%.
Oh, it's the last bit. So you're not recommending we wouldn't proceed now with these service expansions.
the
It's
first
the end of the year that you're saying.
First three set of changes would still go forward.
The next one would be impossible to not do at this point, the May one.
Right.
Okay, so it's already.
How far below 90 are you now, just to clear this up?
We're at roughly 90 now.
90, but you're going to go,
The idea is between now and the end of the calendar year to get to 100.
Ramping up to
Right.
100.
It's about 88% right now.
88, that's what I'm looking for, okay. So, yeah,
88 to
90
90
now,
in May,
90 in May.
94 in July, 97 in September, and then that's where I would stop it.
Yeah.
And reevaluate the last 3% next January.
And what are we talking here? Is this headways on the same routes? Is this
It's
hours of operation?
essentially have the entire system running, but not at the headways that it was running before. So almost all of these are headway adjustments. There are a couple other service changes that are embedded in this. Things like serving the White Oak Medical Center in the East County that's not currently served is in the July service adjustment. So there are some additional services and changes to service, but the vast majority of this is headway changes, either getting from very long headways on routes that have not been brought back to previous headways, or, where we have ridership pressure and short headways already, and that does exist in our system on a few routes, to bring those headways down to reduce the crowding on those routes.
Okay, well, I share the view that service comes first, and we ought to expand service or have adequate service as a higher priority than fare reduction. Everything's nice to have if you can have everything, but often that's not the case. Okay. I don't know that I would recommend we make this reduction, but I understand why council staff has presented us with the option, so. Back to my
Yes,
colleagues.
yes. Dr. Orland's doing a good job of carrying out the council president's instructions to identify some potential savings here. The 1.3 million that might be saved by deferring the hiring of 22 operators, does that include, right now, if we don't hire them, will we be paying any overtime because we've had so many vacancies? Does that number include any savings in?
The 22 operators is what's needed to operate the last 3%, so it's the same. It shouldn't make
Only
any.
for that, okay, for the last 3%. Dan's nodding,
We,
okay.
we would not make that last increment without it being
Right.
budgeted.
Got it, okay. There's no offset, okay.
Yeah, so I agree with the sentiment that we need to have good service in order to bring people back and to acknowledge the people who've been dependent on Ride-On throughout the whole pandemic. They deserve a frequent and smooth ride just like everybody else has. And so I too understand council staff's directive here in trying to put the whole $6.3 billion budget in perspective, but I don't think it should be done on the backs of those who most need it, and those residents who have been dependent on public transit, and particularly our ride-on bus system for the last 2 years, who have had no other options, deserve good access. So I would reject that, and I also appreciate, Director Conklin, you mentioning that the stepped up service also includes service to the Adventist Hospital in White Oak, which I've corresponded with you on, having heard from residents, particularly in the East County Citizens Advisory Board. And so I'm glad that public transit will now finally be accessible to that hospital so people can get the health care that they need. So I concur at least with Councilmember Reamer.
Sounds like we're resistant to
chair.
this well-intentioned cut.
Okay. The next item is the Transportation Services Improvements Fund. You've had work sessions on this, including one this last winter. The executives come back with a pretty comprehensive list of new initiatives that would be funded out of that fund, a total of $2.9 million in FY23, and it draws down the reserve or the reserve in that fund over time. Actually, the last couple of years of the 6-year period, it actually builds back up again. The details of it are in the attachment. I don't know if I'll go through each one unless you'd like me to, or like the department to. My point here is that all of these, first of all of these are legitimate in terms of the law. The law would allow all of this. The question is, where do you want to put the money? My recollection of the original reason for why there is a fee on Uber and Lyft is because they weren't picking up seniors and disabled, at least to any degree. And there were not particularly wheelchair accessible vehicles available for them. And so I think the preference would be that the money go as much as possible to things that would get more ideas that would get more waves on the street, wheelchair accessible vehicles on the street, and keep them on the street longer. And of the 9 items, and I should have numbered them, for some reason I didn't, the 9 initiatives that I've listed, summarized on the bottom page 3, items 2, 3, and 4 directly do that. Increasing the per mile payment for wave taxi cabs from 10 cents to 25 cents. Increasing the per trip payment for wave taxi cabs from $15 during the daytime to $20. It's already $20 overnight between midnight and 6 a.m. And increasing the reimbursement for the purchase of retrofit waves from $15,000 to $30,000. The others, to a lesser degree, really address sort of the core reasons why we have the fee. And I highlighted 3 of them, which I thought really have some concerns about. The first one is the call and ride program. While it's an excellent idea to further expand the eligibility of call and ride, and this proposal does that, it takes the last or the higher income category, which is still pretty low income, in the call and ride eligibility. It raises it by about $5,000, and it also reduces the age requirement from 65 to 63. The question really is as to how is that funded? It's $150,000 a year. The entire rest of the call and ride program is paid for out of the Mass Transit Fund. Basically general taxes, property tax is what it is. It seems a bit strange to have this increment, this small increment, being paid for by the TSIF and then in the future continue to be paid for by the TSIF. I don't think that that is any more related to, again, the needs of seniors and disabled than the rest of it. So the preferable thing would be that that would be paid for out of the general fund rather, or the Mass Transit Fund rather than the TSIF. The operating expense grant let's take the grants to nonprofits. Nonprofits also provide service to seniors and disabled, obviously, and they also could use more money in the way of purchasing wheelchair accessible vehicles or retrofitting their existing vehicles to do that. So I think that that item, which is the fifth one on the list, makes a lot of sense. I'm a little more worried about the sixth one, which is the operating grant, because the way this has been written, it's kind of open-ended. It would provide more of a subsidy for just administrative costs of nonprofits that provide these kinds of services, and other expenses which aren't really directly related to waves themselves or putting them on the street. So I'm a little concerned about that one, unless it was really, really restricted to specific improvements or maintenance of a, say, a wheelchair lift. When one breaks down, you need to replace it, that kind of thing. And the one that I think strays the furthest from at least the idea as to why we even have a fee is the last one, which is allowing funds to be used by other departments for their services that provide service to seniors and disabled. The example was the rec department could use a bus that has wheelchair accessible lifts, and I raised the analogy. Well, if there was a ride-on bus that had a lift that was no longer working, replacing that lift, would that be paid for by the TSIF? No. So why would we do that for the rec department? So I'm not recommending any real specific changes here, but I was hoping to be a little bit of a discussion with the council members to see how they feel about this with the department, and maybe come to a more of a consensus, or may come to a consensus as to where the money should be going. We also got an email this morning from Dr. Morgan, who objects to the first one, the money being used for the training program for the taxi cab drivers. I'm not objecting to the need to do that, but just saying that shouldn't come out of the TSIF. And he agrees with items 2, 3, and 4, and he said that items 5 through 9 are not ones that the commission's really reviewed. They just sort of learned of just saw the specific program that was being put forward just this past Friday. So now I know DOT went out and actually solicited ideas from not only the Commission on People with Disabilities but others as well. But given the time of when these amendments had to come over, it was a little difficult to actually then go back to all of them. So I was just hoping for a little bit of a discussion amongst yourselves.
How much notice did the Commission on Disabilities have to review?
Well, we did not circulate this for review. We solicited input from a wide variety of agencies and stakeholder groups, took the ideas that they had and formulated this program for presentation as part of the budget. So there wasn't any separate review of the recommendations afterwards, although the recommendations were based on the ideas that were generated from all of these groups. So I'm not surprised by Dr. Morgan's response that he hadn't reviewed them, because that wasn't the way we went about formulating the program recommendation here. We had their input and their ideas are reflected in here, but this is not a consensus view of everybody whose ideas were solicited.
Right. I feel like we just had this discussion several months ago and in previous years, and we could avoid this, I think, if with enough time you sat down with them to really make sure that you were presenting us with recommendations that they were comfortable with.
Well, there's other groups that have recommendations too, like the Taxi Commission, who many of these recommendations they may not be comfortable with. And
right.
Commission on Aging represented other views that the Disability Commission may not agree with. So there's a tension here between the different stakeholders in this fund and what ideas they like and don't like. So I don't think we would ever have a sense of recommendations that are complete consensus among everybody who's a stakeholder here. But if it's helpful to you, I can give some background on how this is formulated and how we went about it. It was October of last year we reached out to get ideas, seeing that we had the balance that was too large in this fund, and there's no question about that, and putting more of the money to use. So we made a couple of recommendations that were essentially one-time or shorter-term expenditures that's in the funding chart that's later in your packet. Those are largely the capital expenditures for nonprofits, recognizing the need for those agencies to provide more transportation. And they provide a lot of transportation to regularly scheduled programs in their facilities, adult daycare providers, community-based groups, religious-based groups that bring people together for these programs. And we get requests for those. The council has funded some of those in the past from groups like JCA for those. So those were in the shorter term. But in the longer term, the vast majority, and also the county vehicle that Mr. Orland discussed, is one of those elements as well. That's a one-time expenditure. The longer term elements in this are all geared towards the delivery of service. 200,000 of that is again to those nonprofits that provide the more regularly scheduled transportation to programs. But about 1.7 million of that is dedicated to the more demand responsive taxi operated services. So with the recommendations here over the longer term, we're essentially tripling the amount of expenditure on taxi and taxi related transportation activities supported by this fund, whether those be waves or the subsidies for the trips that are made by the target communities with these funds. And the long-term expenditures for the non-taxis dropped precipitously after the second year, down to about 200,000 a year. So the vast majority of the recommendations here are supporting WAVE, senior, and other trips that are made through these sponsored programs with the TSIF dollars. And just a couple comments on the expansion. I mean, the idea of this fund is to improve the services for low-income, senior, and disabled. And things like expanding the call-in ride is improving the services for the senior and low-income populations, which is exactly the intention of the fund. So I don't personally feel that it's unusual that there would be a mix of base program plus program enhancements coming from different sources. Many projects and programs within the county government are funded by multiple sources of revenue. So I know Dr. Orland raises that as a concern, but that was not a concern for us in formulating this recommendation. And just lastly, Dr. Rogers and Ms. Riley here, Director Riley, are here from Recreation and Health and Human Services to speak to what the specific ideas were for that service improvement for the Recreation Department, with being able to move people who aren't otherwise able to get to recreation programs to those programs, and Health and Human Services, which are more improving the service for their program customers and getting to those programs. So I don't know if you want to hear from them, but they're here today to talk specifically about those, since council staff seem to have the most concern with that element of the program. With that, I'll leave it to your questions, because I'm sure there are a lot. This is not a simple formulation of activities, and there's a longer term strategy here, with the first couple years key to drawing down the significant balance, and the longer term to try to have a sustainable level of support for the services that are supported by this fund in the long term.
Questions?
Sure. Thank you for the response to the chair's questions. I appreciate Dr. Morgan's memo to us and expanding upon his thoughts in this area, which we all greatly appreciate. I agree with his assessment that items 2, 3, and 4 follow or are in line with the spirit of the funding mechanism, absolutely. And Director Conklin, you were just starting to elaborate a little bit more on, I guess, what I'll say is a combined nearly $1 million for expansion into other programs. Well, that's actually not what you were just referring to. You were talking about the $550,000 at the end with the kind of intergovernmental aspect. But with regard to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, the $800,000 and the $200,000, I mean, we have nonprofit organizations, JESA, Easter Seals, other programs that provide these services. So what exactly would that combined $1 million be used for?
That's exactly a good question. What we would propose to do is set up a grant program where people would apply to the program to show that they have a need for capital equipment with the $800,000 to expand the services to their target communities. And then we would award that to those organizations based on the applications that they would make. We would have to establish that program. That we have not gone through the whole process of establishing program criteria, evaluation criteria, whether the award would be first come, first served, or proportional based on eligible applications, or however we would do that. But that's how that component would work. And then the second component, we would expect in the first couple of years, it would be likely that those are joint applications to then be able to offset any additional operating costs for those nonprofit organizations to actually provide the service with the capital equipment that they're expanding. So if they're proposing a new handicap accessible van to move more people to a program at a community center or religious organization, or whatever it is, that obviously has to be supported by operation, and many of these organizations are strapped and raise their money through fundraising or member fees or fees to the user or other things, and this additional funding would help offset that additional operating cost. So that would, the operating cost component would continue. The capital component is a 2-year program as we formulated it here, and then that would sunset. So that over that 2 years, we would get the new components in there, not only new, but other organizations that didn't propose for the capital could also seek the operating. So that's the notion behind those. Just recognizing that if somebody's going to an activity 3 days a week that's the same activity, they may be better served by that organization's regular transportation than by scheduling a taxi or other on-demand type transportation method to get it, and it's probably more cost-effective.
Sure.
As well. So that was the notion between those two.
No, and I understand that rationale, and as a member of this committee and also the Health and Human Services Committee for the last 4 years or so, I've engaged in a lot of conversation with the nonprofit partners, and you all too, about how to better synchronize some of the services, meet the needs, and then of course there was the pandemic, which changed the dynamics entirely. And many of the fleets that we're referring to that are already in existence were sitting idle for understandable reasons, and now we're all starting to come back up. I understand the rationale for what you're saying, but I will put this out for my colleagues' indulgence, though. The first item, the first action that the council took on this budget was to reduce it by $20 million when we decided to disapprove of the county executive's decision on the retirement fund. And I know that we've all been tasked with trying to recoup some of that and then some. And so of these items,
You would have to change the law to offset.
the 800 and the 200?
Yeah, but,
Well, so that begs another question that I have written down, that to the chair's point, didn't we talk about this a few months ago and a few years ago about money that's just sitting in the fund anyway? I mean, isn't that the problem belying this?
The direction we responded to is to draw down that fund balance and put it to good work through these programs. So that's it's not, we were working on it before that work session, obviously.
So this is in direct response to our concerns about the money sitting idly, and so
Yes.
these programs have been coming.
Mr. Glass, if I can interrupt just for a
Yeah,
second.
please.
If you decided not to do some of these things, that would just bring the fund balance higher. It
Yeah,
wouldn't say-
I understand that.
budget.
I get it.
So it's a matter of whether or not you want to spend it on other things here, deeper the discount, or just let the fund balance be higher than it would otherwise be. But it doesn't help the rest of the budget.
Yep. Okay.
Can I, the purpose of the fund is to get waves on the street and to provide that service. And
We differ in that interpretation. Our interpretation is to improve the service to the disabled, elderly, and low-income community, whether that's through a taxi-operated wave or a different type of transportation.
pretty sure the interpretation of this committee for at least the 8 years I've been here is that the purpose of the fund is to get waves on the street to provide the service to the disability community that we would have preferred Uber and Lyft had to provide if the state assembly hadn't been persuaded by the very talented lobbyists of Uber and Lyft. So, we are left, we collect that quarter, we're left with this responsibility at the county level. That's why we set the fund up in the first place. That's why we tightened up the law under Chairman Berliner to restrict the ability of the previous department in offloading the fees for other services. So, to me, the fund ought to be used for the purpose of the fund, which is aided by recommendations 2, 3, and 4 in here. And I'm not sure 30,000 is enough. Maybe Sam knows back there, but I think a lot of the drivers would say, or Hannah, that maybe I think the drivers would say they need more than 30,000. But in any case, 2, 3, and 4 fulfill the purpose of the fund, as I understand the fund. And if that can't happen quickly enough, and there's need for expanding those funds to allow JSA or somebody else to provide to backfill and to provide some services for their members, that's probably fine too. The operating, funding of those programs on an ongoing basis, I'm definitely not comfortable using the fund for, or training or other things.
Let me clarify what I say. I mean, the WAVE could be operated by a taxi operator or it could be operated by another organization. So the capital component for WAVE, I think we're on the same page. On the operating component, we do fund operation of WAVEs through trip subsidies for taxis now, and we would be doing something similar for the nonprofit programs through this recommendation. I hear you questioning the first and last, to be sure, in this list. The driver training component was a result from the taxi customer satisfaction survey, which illustrated a number of challenges with the drivers being properly trained to deal with the customers with these special needs and for themselves to be comfortable taking those trips. So it's trying to get both a better quality of service to the disabled, principally disabled customers that have unique challenges in taking advantage of the WAVE service, and to increase the taxi operators' willingness to accept those trips so that they were more comfortable, that they knew how to deal with the customers' needs when they got there. So that was the purpose of the first recommendation. It was about the quality of service, not necessarily the quantity of service to that group of customers. And then, as we haven't really talked about, but there is the question of the county-operated service, one component being REC, the other Health and Human Services, that we can share more detail on if you'd like. But that is a different type of thing than the other recommendations.
We're providing more funding, which was the original intent. Couldn't we just ask the taxi providers for whom the drivers actually work to provide training like this and make sure that they weren't discriminating and that they were competent in providing services for disabled riders, rather than using county funds to do that out of this fund in particular?
There is training provided by the taxi companies now. That training does not seem to have had the desired impact on the quality of service that we're getting. So there seem to be
We have a lot of leverage over these companies. Shouldn't we encourage them to fix their training rather than just supplementing it?
I don't know that the companies are flush with resources either, and it seemed like a reasonable
Is it a cost issue?
public purpose. Well, I think it's a cost issue, and it's a standard of material and delivery of that material. So this would be, the course would be developed with Montgomery College, and it could either occur there or it could occur at the taxi place of business. But the training would then be standardized and delivered by somebody with expertise in education rather than somebody, whomever the taxi company happened to bring on board to do it at the time. So the idea was that this would result in better training and more universal training of the taxi operators. You can say that may not be necessary, you can make the decisions you'd like, but that was the intention of this recommendation.
I mean, generally, I think there's evidence that private sector employers intake information more effectively, take it more seriously, whatever, if it's delivered by their boss as a condition of employment, rather than
The
a
employee-employer
training that the government
relationship in the
requires
taxi
them to go
industry is a little bit more complex, where you have independent operators that are dispatched
Sure.
by a single company, a lot of independence among the operators from the company.
But no.
So this seemed to be a better way to get that material to the operators.
The fund has never been successful, in short, in my view, I don't think anybody's view, at the core purpose of the fund. And to me, we need to apply ourselves to that problem rather than spending the money to meet the goal through other strategies.
Well, I hear you on that, but the recommended expenditures here are $1.7 million over the long term, $1.7 million for taxi-related programs and $200,000 for the non-taxi related programs. And that 1.7 is over a base of 800,000 in this year. So it's a tripling of the current level of effort with the taxi component of the program.
Sure. And I think that's appropriate given the failure of us to administer the fund in a way that meets the goals of the fund.
We're trying to fix that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, building on those comments, so my general concern is I think that we have a ways to go before it's time to start thinking about uses for the funding that just kind of dissipate. I think we should focus on having a concentrated impact with the funding. And our goal was to help create a transformational service, which is a wheelchair accessible fleet. And so I really think we ought to lean more into the capital expenditures that can create vehicles and hopefully drivers, and just keep building that, and then supporting the fleets to provide that service. I remember we talked about the idea of getting to the point where there was a certain response time. Like wherever you were in the county, if you needed a wheelchair accessible vehicle, there was a certain response time that would be comparable to all on-demand transportation. Maybe 10 minutes. Like you can call and you can get a wheelchair accessible vehicle in 10 minutes. And I think that was like a really, I thought, wonderful goal. It was a wonderful way of thinking about the challenge and the need for more focused action. Councilmember Hucker mentioned, wasn't sure if this was adequate funding, for example, on the reimbursement. So my staff has been talking with council staff and with Dr. Morgan, and I would recommend a few adjustments here. I do think we should hear a little bit more about some of the uses. I know our friends from the rec department are here, and I'm not quite just yet. I'm going to save the hard part for later, I think. But I will say, just as a preface, if they have a fantastic opportunity to use additional resources for really great impact, I think we could consider adding that to the reconciliation list. I'm just a little worried about, again, just sort of dissipating the opportunity that we have for a focused impact. So what I wanted to kind of put out there for colleagues' discussion and reaction here is, take a pass on the training idea. It sounds a worthy initiative. Not saying any of this is bad, but increase the per mile payment for wave taxi cabs from 10 cents to 40 cents. So your proposal was to 25 cents. Increase the per trip payment for wave taxi cabs to $25. So you had $20. And increase the reimbursement to $45,000 from $15,000. And that would help us build a fleet. And I think that's kind of the essential goal. And keep the capital grant program, but then not keep the operating grant. And as Glenn said, the call and ride thing ought to go back to the transit fund, wherever it was. And I do think we can hear about rec and their potential use, but we ought to potentially put that on the reconciliation list and try to fund it in that manner. So that would increase the funding necessary from the fund for items 2, 3, and 4. And I don't know if Glenn, if you know the figures off the top of your head. That's what I got.
I'll just go through this is something Councilmember Reamer asked me to look at. The second item, going from 10 cents to 40 cents, the idea is if it costs $295,000 to get to 25 cents, another 15 cent jump would be another $295,000. The third item, going from $15 to $20, during the day, if that costs $368,000, then going from $15 to $25 during the day, and going from $20 to $25 at night, would, again, order of magnitude probably be another $400,000. Increasing the reimbursement for the purchase of retrofit of wave taxi cabs, if it's $360,000 to go from $15,000 to $30,000, another $15,000 increase to $45,000 would be another $360,000. So the three of those numbers together total. This part I didn't write down. Totals $1,055,000. Then the other side of it, if you decide that the taxi training program is something that should be in the budget, if you added it to the reconciliation list, and it goes into the budget, we can come out of the mass transit fund. That's $190,000. Savings true with the operating grant for the nonprofits. That's another $200,000. The call and ride increment could go on the reconciliation list for another $150,000, and then the needs for the other departments, including rec. If you did all of the 550, that would go on the reconciliation list too, or maybe just some part of it, depending on what you do. Those four add up to about $1,090,000. So it's basically brings the fund to pretty much the same level as to what the executive is recommending, but just puts more emphasis on items 2, 3, and 4, considerably more emphasis in 2, 3, 4. And the items 1, 6, 7, and 9 are ones that would not be increased with the TSIF, but depending how you feel about them, could go on the reconciliation list.
All right, so I apologize to my colleagues for not being able to share this with you in advance. As you can see, it's even handwritten. That means you know it has been in late development. But I suggest that, and I'll certainly be happy to hear your reaction to the fleet potential, how those funds could be used, and any comments you want to make, recognizing that you came here with a different budget.
I'm not exactly sure how to respond on the spot to the change and the recommendation, obviously, but I think you're still providing the benefit for expanded service by nonprofits with what you've recommended. I don't know whether they'll be able to operate the capital that they're able to access through this program, so I might encourage you to marry some of the capital expansion for nonprofits with the operating for nonprofits. Much like the taxi industry, the availability to get the vehicle is half the problem. The other half is to have somebody driving the vehicle and to pay them. So I don't know that one size of that or one half of that equation works for the nonprofit sector. Some of these are fungible, obviously. We're trying to increase availability of the services to a broad set of stakeholders, and if the interest is more on the service side, then I think we can take that direction from the committee, that you'd rather see more emphasis on the provider and vehicle side than on the customer side, because things like expanding the wave participation is expanding the number of people who can access the system, but not necessarily directly impacting the size of the system they're taking advantage of. So yes, it does put more money into taxis and other service providers, but it's also doing that by increasing the population that can use them rather than just increasing the subsidy per trip that they're making for the existing population. So it's a relatively complex set of issues here, and we had a certain outcome based on the work we did, and you're proposing something slightly different. So it's hard to say, yes, you're right, no, you're wrong, because it's just different. That's my initial reaction.
That all is a fair reaction. There's two questions on each of these. Is it a worthy expenditure of the county budget? And then the second one is it an appropriate expenditure for the TSIF, right? And I would argue most of these nonprofits, to my knowledge, get county grants through HHS or another agency, and their operating expenses ought to be funded, to me, through HHS and their other agencies. If we get, there are many grants we get from, say, the federal or state government for electric buses recently or other things like that. It doesn't come with permanent operating subsidy. It's just for the bus. And if they have trouble with the initial capital outlay for the wave, that seems like a fine transportation expenditure for us. But signing up for ongoing operating expenses when it's really the purview of the HHS committee to decide whether this is a good nonprofit we want to keep funding in their operating expenses. To me, that's where it ought to come from, not from a program with one purpose only, which I thought has always been to get waves on the street.
Yeah, but yes, you're right, but getting waves on the street requires both it be more rewarding to the operator of the vehicle and the owner of the vehicle, and sometimes those are the same entity, and oftentimes they're not. So if your driver is not getting, which you're recommending doing this, but the service related payments, then that wave may sit idle. So I think the same is true for the nonprofits.
But for an independent operator, or either one.
No, in your recommendation,
Increasing the
you have
per
that
mile
covered.
and subsidizing the purchase of the vehicle, which if you talk to the drivers, and they were all in front of us on Zoom several months ago, they said the reason this has failed is because we don't get enough money to buy a vehicle, because the vehicle costs have gone up so much, right?
Well, and there's not enough incentive to have the vehicle in service because the payments to the operator are too low. You have both of those solved
Both of the-
taxi in your recommendation.
Right.
All I'm saying is that same situation is present for the other providers, that they both have to be able to have the vehicle and operate it. So
Right.
I would recommend that you have some split in that funding for both the taxi, as you've already accomplished,
Right.
and the nonprofit operators.
I'm not saying it's an unworthy expenditure, it just seems like an HHS issue and not a transportation issue, to me.
What I was going to say is that Mr. Conklin's first point, I mean, you could redefine what that fifth category is to basically be a grant program, which is mainly for capital grants, but it could be operating, if it's directly tied to wave operation, it could be part of the same program. Now, I know the capital program that's being proposed is only for 2 years, and the operating would continue, but, you know, we could worry about that 2 years from now. So, I mean,
Right, presumably it's shuttles, it's a lot of things, right, in this formulation.
Our expectation is that it's predominantly shuttle bus operations, from picking customers up wherever they may live to taking them to a program and then back home.
And the capital grant program would be for shuttle buses, presumably.
That's our expectation, and that's maybe 2-3 shuttle buses with that amount of money. It's not a huge opportunity.
Not a lot of money.
And that could be, I think that could be, I mean, all of this is broadly consistent in many ways, but you're trying to stand up a fleet. I think that's the kind of core
Right.
thing.
That's
Can I just want to go back, and I don't want to belabor this conversation, but on a more basic level, the nearly $3 million for the cost of these programs, as you've highlighted them, or even as Councilmember has amended them. Yeah, no, you are Reamer. No, but has amended them. You're not that forgettable, don't worry. Is that that's what's brought in? That's what's anticipated to be brought in by the tax, right?
There's a starting balance that's relatively large.
Right. So that's the question, right?
And then by the end of this, we were trying to have it be at a sustainable level by the end of a 6-year period.
Correct, and that's
Expecting the revenues would start to increase beyond that.
you're taking me down the road that the first question was leading us towards. And so regardless of the makeup here, making sure it is sustainable needs to be our top priority, recognizing that there was such a big fund balance and trying to reformulate the program so that people and organizations and businesses would actually utilize them, and then just making sure that it is sustainable. I would actually agree with your assessment that the interdepartmental nature is germane here, because ultimately this program is trying to help with mobility, and so many people who need assistance with mobility rely on other government services, whether it is recreation, whether it is HHS. And to expand the conversation even further, recognizing that Montgomery County has the largest percentage of seniors in the entire DMV, as we start planning for more needs and more use of our services, this very well might be the vehicle, no pun intended, to get us to where we need to go with regard to caring for an aging population that does have mobility issues. So,
Mr. Glass, if I could just, if you look on circles 22 and 23, DOT's prepared a 6-year fund display of what this program would look like. And on circle 23, in the right-hand column, you'll see the fund balance that would be, and we're starting at about $3.7 million. It draws down to as low as about $775,000 in FY26, but it builds back up again after that. So what the department's put forward is something that is sustainable. Of course, there's hundreds of different ways you can do these sets of programs and still have sustainability, but it is sustainable.
If we wanted to allow the nonprofits to have some flexibility about the split between capital and operating, we could also specify that it could be both, right?
You could.
So if we were to,
The only reason we broke it into two pieces is because we were trying to have some initial impact on getting the fleets available and renewed, and knowing we had a big fund balance and then not have that continue indefinitely. But you could formulate it differently, and we just have to adjust that in later years as the expenditures occur.
we could say, you know, if we keep the 800,000, but say it can be for operating and capital, and you could retain your general sense of that split, which it looks like, you know, it was 4-1. Yeah.
I go along with that.
What do my colleagues think about increasing the wave focused payments and reimbursements, and then removing many of the other items? We could hear from Rec about the interdepartmental.
Good afternoon. Robin Riley, for the record, Director of Recreation Department. I think this is a complicated topic. For us in Recreation, we thought this was a perfect resource to help us with some gaps that we've identified. When our seniors arrive at a senior center and then they get a trip home, they're literally in the senior center for the entire time. We felt like this transportation opportunity would not only provide opportunity for us to do mini trips, to take a group of seniors from a senior center to a farmer's market, to downtown Silver Spring, for a swim at a pool, and then come back and be able to get a ride home. Without that opportunity of this bus, we can't do that. Our current provider, JCA, cannot provide those services. They are, their drivers are limited by time, and so they have to arrive at this, pick up the seniors at their homes or nearby homes, deliver them to the senior center, and then take them back. So that limits that. The other opportunity this bus provides to us is we have a therapeutic recreation program that we are standing up, well, we've stood up for years, countywide. It's both youth and adults. And we struggle with transportation. We have one van that has a wheelchair accessibility, one. So our limitations to provide opportunity from Inwood House and other group homes or other individuals with disabilities to take them anywhere for a trip or an opportunity is basically eliminated. We can't do it. So this bus would actually give us those opportunities to do that. We also felt, sorry.
Director Riley, so you wanted to buy a bus? Is that what
Yes.
you plan to use?
Yes.
How much of that? How much of this?
Rely on my transportation friends to help me. I don't regularly buy buses.
350,000.
Sorry.
350,000.
So of the 550 that was intended for interdepartmental uses, 350 is for a bus for rec.
Right.
And it would pick up multiple clients, presumably. That's why it's a
Correct.
bus,
It'd
not
be-
a taxi.
Correct. We have some 15 passenger vans now, but only one van has a wheelchair lift. And it can only transport one person in a wheelchair. And many of our registrants in our programs, much as we've identified, wait for 45 minutes to an hour to get a handy, if they don't schedule it well in advance, and even when they do sometimes, they're sitting waiting to be picked up either on the way back from the program or to get to the program. By then they've missed the program. So this gave us lots of opportunities. This would be a small bus, 22 passenger. And
Can't these taxi fleets also be integrated? I mean, can't you provide folks with the ability to call for a ride and provide them with a voucher or something like that?
yeah, and many do. It's just the service is, especially on evenings and weekends, is very challenging, and many of them wait 45 minutes to an hour
For a private ride.
for a private provider.
That's because the administration of this fund has been a failure. right? And we heard from residents, and we heard from the Commission on People with Disabilities this fall, that often people have to call 24 hours ahead to get a wheelchair accessible taxi.
Correct.
That was not what we anticipated 6 years ago when it was set up, or when we tightened up the law 4 years ago.
So you've identified that your clients they would call for a wheelchair accessible taxi, but you're finding that there's not a lot of them out there. It takes a day sometimes to be able to schedule a pickup.
Correct.
And so your solution is, can we buy a bus of our own and sort of work around that gap? And that's certainly something that, we probably you should probably have one anyway. I mean, it's too bad that you have multiple buses and they're not accessible. But I think we're also saying we could try to solve that problem from a different direction and provide more taxi vehicles. I can't tell you what of an impact that's going to have exactly on your ability to schedule those rides, but over time, that's the vision, is that you can get one all the time.
In a way that's more nimble, I would just say, too.
Yeah.
You have multiple rec centers, one bus isn't going to solve your problem,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, I sit on the age-friendly committee with Sam and others, and this fund has been a topic for years.
Right.
And I don't even know that the providers, if you talk to them, I think there's lots of challenges with it. But for us, this opportunity to buy a bus gave us lots of nimbleness in different areas, both for seniors as well as for the disabled community. And so we thought it was a perfect fit.
Well, I think we ought to support the purchase of these vehicles for the fleets, but we ought to have a very nimble partnership so that that resource is being utilized, so that those trips are being booked by the county more often. I mean, one risk we have is it's a wave vehicle, but it's being used for non-wave trips. And if we're going to start investing more in wave vehicles, it would be good for us to also have a way to use that resource in a way that's most effective.
I just wanted to mention, I think the key thing that Director Riley mentioned is to be able to use this within the context of their program, not just for transportation to and from the program, but to enhance the opportunity for the customer while they're there to have a different experience than being in the senior center.
Field trips is how I
Yeah,
interpret
absolutely. They're mini trips, basically.
it. Mini trips, yeah.
So they can,
And is that, the 325 is for the vehicle, was there additional funding, or was that for other departmental requests?
Well, that was for HHS customer needs, and Dr. Rogers is here also, if you want to hear.
Well, right. So if I could make a suggestion, we're having a very good conversation about this and trying to draw down the funds and plan them out for the next year, and then some. Dr. Morgan shared with us his preliminary thoughts on some of these, and has stated that the Commission on People with Disabilities has not been able to weigh in, and ultimately that's the community we're really trying to help here. And so I would very much like to be able to approve this in some form or fashion that it is still malleable enough that the Commission can have a conversation with you all over the next, again, I don't know if it's the fiscal year, if it's structured in such a way, but then dispense of this item.
Could you repeat that for me, please?
The framework is pretty much here, even with the amendments that you've mentioned, but allow it to move forward, approved by the committee today, with some flexibility on the department's behalf, that after consultation with the commission can then better shape it.
Well, I don't know if that's, so what I had recommended was a set of changes that would produce no net fiscal impact, really. It was, so if we want to increase the payments for wave vehicles and trips, and increase the amount provided on the capital grants essentially for wave vehicles, then that's, it costs about $1 million. So I was seeking to offset that with removing things from the fund that we feel are not as targeted towards that core goal of creating fleet, But to the extent that there's some pretty compelling needs, we could recommend to, and I would propose as part of this, we could also recommend adding that to the reconciliation list and then try to ensure that we get that also.
Can I just suggest a procedural thing? Because the proposal Mr. Reamer put forward, you're just hearing it for the first time and it's not in paper. And given the time, the next item is going to be, after this budget, it's going to be really long. So I'm suggesting we have one more work session, which we don't have anything scheduled for T&E. I can't remember which date's in May. I think it's next week. And what we could do is have a work session. I still would like to get through the rest of number 2, but have this item come back, and Mr. Reamer's proposal be really spelled out there. The Commission on People with Disabilities and everybody else can see that, and they can weigh in prior to that meeting. And then also, I would actually put the third agenda item onto that next meeting as well, because that's going to take probably a half hour, 45 minutes at least. And I think it depends how long you want to stay today.
You wouldn't take any action on any of this today?
Sorry?
You wouldn't take action on anything in your chart today?
On this item, on the TSIF, I still want to get to the fairs, I still want to get to the other items in this.
Yeah, no, I'm sure we do too. I mean, I feel like we agree on 2, 3, and 4, right?
Right.
And the question is, are we going to load up on 2, 3, and 4 from these other?
Yeah. It may be a relatively short discussion in the next meeting. I mean, you have the general discussion already pretty much here. You might have a little more information, but it'd be good to actually have on paper for everyone to see exactly what the numbers would be in each of these categories, and then
That's
you could
fine.
go from there. That's my
That's
suggestion.
better than approving 2, 3, and 4 and putting the rest on the rec list.
Right.
Because we can come back to it. Okay,
You
fine.
may end up putting the rest on the rec list or part
We
of
have
it.
that option at the
You have that
time.
option.
But that also means that the outreach will be done to the commission, right?
Yeah.
Thoughts? I mean, whether it's the three of us and independently do it, then as long as that provides that time.
Yeah. I don't know if they'll be able to have a formal meeting, but
Understood.
Morgan can reach out to the other members.
Yep.
Of the committee.
Right.
Just as a reminder, they're one of the committees that advised on this.
I understand. It's the one that we heard from this morning,
They're one
so.
we're particularly interested in their feedback. given
A
the
chair,
history of this
former
file.
chair, yes.
Were the providers consulted on this as well for their feedback on the budget?
Taxi industry?
Yeah, before.
Yes.
Okay. Just through the members of the commission, or?
Through the members of the commission and those who participate in their meetings, whether they're members or not.
Okay, okay. I hadn't seen any letter from them or anything. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
That sound fine to everybody? Okay, well done, Dr. Worley.
Okay, so the next item is the fairs. And here, the executive is recommending bringing back fairs in July to half the rate of what it was before, $1. And you heard testimony at the public hearing in support of that from the Commission on the Coalition of Smart Growth and others. I give a little bit of history of this, but you pretty much know the history, that Ride-On has been free since 2 years ago, a little more than 2 years ago. Metro on Metro Bus brought back its $2 fare in January of 2021. So for the last 16 months, folks taking Metro Bus, and they have the same racial and income profile as Ride-On bus riders and represent 40% of the bus riders in the county. They've been paying $2. The executive's proposal would bring the Ride-On fare up to $1. It wouldn't touch the Metro Bus fares. Mr. Glass has given us some memos in the packet recommending that we go with free fare continuing through all of FY23, and he's asked for what other options there would be. And so I put together some options on the top of page 6, 10 of them. I'm not going to go through each one. Basically, what it is combinations of whether it's $1 for Ride-On and $1 for Metrobus, or $1 for Ride-On, $2 for Metrobus, free Ride-On and free Metrobus, free Ride-On and just keep them $2 for Metrobus. One option, actually, what I'm recommending, don't know where it's going to go, but using the same amount of money that the executive's using to to have the fare be $1, instead charge $1.45 for both Metrobus and Ride-On. That's the same amount of money could be used for that and not have to add to the budget. If it was $1.40 for each, it would be adding like $400,000, be pretty minor. And then also looking at some options where Ride-On would be free on weekends. It would be same as the executive, $1 fare, but free on weekends, and combinations of Ride-On, Metrobus, and that as well. Another reminder is Mr. Albornoz, the council president, has said that anything that goes on the reconciliation list, and all of this would have to go on the reconciliation list, can't be, if it's more than $500,000, it has to be in tranches. And so, for example, in the option of keeping Ride-On free, but not Metrobus, for the rest of the year, $9.8 million, I'm recommending you have 12 tranches, basically one for each month, that you decide to have the free fare. Just so that when you get to reconciliation, you can decide what piece of the 9.8 you would do, or any of those. So that's my recommendation. My strong recommendation is that go back to what you've been doing forever, and what you have been doing for Kids Ride Free and for Seniors Ride Free, which is charge the same thing to Metrobus and Ride-On riders, because they're the same people.
Well, I agree. I just think that I don't know how we justify riders in one neighborhood paying and riders in another neighborhood not paying. And what I like about Glenn's proposal is we could put the systems on an even footing, and then we could add funding to the reconciliation list to do what Councilmember Glass is seeking to do, which is make everything free at all times. So we could potentially have a both and approach here, but start with the the foundational step be one that reduces fares equitably, for all riders, and then says with additional resources we can try to go to zero, and then do that again equitably for all riders. I think we saw from today's WMATA presentation there's very minimal prospect that WMATA is going to be eliminating fares on its bus service at any time soon, or that the state would step in and do that. And I'm not terribly optimistic about getting the funding off of the rec list, at that kind of level. And so we would be right back where we are, that fund, it costs one set of riders more than another set of riders. So I do think there's an important principle at stake here, and I would encourage us to do that. So keep the goal that Councilmember Glass is focused on, about let's get to free. That's all fundamentally in additional resources. That's all fundamentally reconciliation list resources. But take our existing resources in the budget and stand for the core principle of everybody should have the same ridership cost in buses, and let's not fundamentally be obtuse about the fact that there's just bus service in some areas is by one service, and another it's by another, and so we own it all. It's all, we're responsible for it all, and so let's proceed accordingly.
Mr. Reamer, can I ask, so the options that are listed on top of page 6, are you proposing a specific one? I know you said Metrobus and Ride-On be the same.
Which one is it?
Well, there's several of them. I mean, number
to use
2,
our existing revenue. What's that?
Sorry? Number 2 was equalized. That would cost $7.2 million. That's $1 each.
Well, again, I would like to start with one that is a net fiscal neutral.
Oh.
So that I think is more like
Either 3 or 4.
3 or 4. So yeah, 3. What's 3?
3 actually saves you a little money. 4 would cost a little bit of money, but it's $400,000. It's not.
Right. So 4.
The exact number is probably like $1.43 to break even.
For practical reasons, if you adopt something like that, I would suggest you use a quarter increments.
25-cent increment. Oh, yeah.
Well, but most
Because that would be literally nickel and diming.
riders
people.
using
Yes.
smart trip cards.
Well, except for the riders who can't afford to have.
Not often you get to say that, right, Mary Beck?
I mean, the riders who are most benefited from this often don't store value on their card, and handling lots of change is not easy for anyone.
We could find out what $1.25 costs.
So $1.25 would
Don't have it.
cost us more money on the reconciliation list fundamentally, right? Because it's lower fare than the one.
Save you money theoretically, although we don't really know what the experience will be, but theoretically saves.
So this is a hybrid approach here. This says, let's take our money and put it behind all bus riders, not just a group of bus riders. And then to the extent that we get more money, let's keep the more money behind all bus riders and not just a group of bus riders.
Back when we charged fares, we had about 10% of our passengers pay with cash.
I'm sorry, what percent? 10%?
About.
So, I mean, $1, this is a guesstimate, but if it's costs $400,000 to do $1.40, and if it costs $7.2 million to do $1, then it would be, do the quick math here. It would probably be around it's between 3 and 4 million. I don't have that number in front of me, but that's what the size of it would be to add to the reconciliation list if you went to $1.25.
Between 3 and 4 million to go from 140.
Yeah, because if it's $1, it'd be 7.2 million. Option 2 would be 7.2 million.
You would theoretically save money with $1.50 compared to the executive's recommendation.
If it was $1.50, you'd save money, but I don't know if you want to do $1.50.
Just like to speak to a couple things here, if you'll indulge me. I mean, the executive made this recommendation based on the study you all saw and reviewed with us. The preference was to go to a structure like Charlie Scott talked about today that WMATA is exploring with the district that would still be a local subsidy for service, but would subsidize those riders who most need it and be uniform across the two systems. Given the experience in the region, and Ms. Henn can speak to that more if you're interested, so far it's clear we're not quite ready to go there. So the dollar fare was providing a similar level of benefit, but not as keenly calibrated to the people who need it. On the question of the WMATA fare, it wasn't a question of acknowledging or not acknowledging that we have residents who use WMATA. It was a question more of governance and decision-making, and that WMATA has their own process and their own approach and their own governance and their own responsibility to the region to act in a certain way. And by taking this on as the county, we've eliminated the need for them to recognize this issue and greatly diminished the likelihood of this being handled in a consistent way across the region. To date, I don't think any jurisdiction has waived fares or paid WMATA any fare differential. Alexandria hasn't done that. We would, I think, be the first, which is both exciting and also maybe not a great thing, because then we are eliminating the incentive to have this solved at a regional level. So, and the other thing I wanted to make is about the $1.50 versus $1.25. We're only seeing upward cost pressures in transit. It's not going to be getting any cheaper in the near term, and I would highly suggest that you not further obligate funds that reduce our ability to provide the services we need, like we talked about at the outset of the work session. I wanted to give that perspective on the recommendation was there before you tried to figure out what other avenue you might take.
Yeah, obviously $1.50 would be better for the budget than $1.25 would be. I'm just saying $1.25 because I know the direction of the committee has been more towards to charge less.
I understand.
But yeah, $1.50 would actually
Yeah, I just
save a little bit of money. Sorry?
So the WMATA proposal that you referred to it's under no circumstances is it that all riders will be free. You said it was a means tested.
Yeah, Hannah, why don't you speak to that, because you've had the conversations with them.
Yes, and I actually see Mr. Scott is still here, and he's welcome to join. But we have had multiple conversations on this topic. It is a pilot program that is being funded by the district, and as you make your decision today, based on what I have learned, I would encourage all of us to to consider the fact that there is interesting information to come from this study. So the pilot program will have free fare for some, reduced fare for others, and then a control group. And they will get the ridership information early on in the process. But they're not just looking at ridership, they're looking at overall, as Mr. Scott has described to me, they're looking at overall ability to reach medical appointments, attend school. And as we think to the true long-term regional solution, this is the kind of data that we need. And although it is a district pilot program, I fully intend to insert Montgomery County into it as much as they will allow us to be inserted, so that we can learn from the effort that they are funding.
So your concern there would be, I'm sorry, that if we were to change our fare structure, then it would affect the ability to carry that out.
I would say that the primary concern, from my perspective, would be that we not limit our ability to continue to push for a regional fare program. So a regional approach to solving this fare issue. Our discussion this morning was, who is going to be the champion for that? Who is going to lead that effort? I think our study has shown that it is in our interest to make it go forward for Montgomery County. But if we go to free fare now, or continue with free fare for the short term, it makes it potentially more challenging to have that momentum to pursue this regional solution, which is what we feel we should be
Reduced fare
pursuing.
on WMATA.
Pardon?
You're speaking just to WMATA. If we had free fare or reduced fare, you're talking about ride-on.
No, we would want to do it uniformly if we were to implement it across the two systems.
You're saying the data, the assumption is the data is going to be so compelling.
We have information coming, and we don't have it yet.
How soon do you have it?
Again, Charlie Scott for Metro. So the pilot with the district, again, as Hannah mentioned, it's a randomized controlled trial. So we envision having some data by this fall. That will be the more basic level. We see, this group with free transit riding X% more than the group with 50%, and then relative to the control group. And then the longer term data results that we're looking for would be more the well-being results, and we envision that being assessed at the conclusion of the pilot. So it's a 9-month pilot. We envision the district has started enrolling individuals for a soft launch, and then we'll fully enroll people and start the pilot trial this summer. So by it'll be concluding late, next spring, and then data analysis a couple months after that.
So from the fall to the spring, we'll collect increasing amounts of data.
Yes.
What's the well-being assessment?
Again, and actually before we even started the trial, we've surveyed some of the potential participants to find out, if you had free transit, if you had 50%, what would that mean to you? Would you have better access to jobs, better access to healthcare, better access to, leisure events? And so we're going to be assessing, how did that impact your livelihood?
Rider survey data.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And once you have that, the expectation is DC is going to move in this direction?
It's going to inform, it will inform the district, but
Sure.
and it will also inform WMATA and the region as a whole.
I guess I'm a little bit of a skeptic that WMATA is actually going to move in this direction if data show that dropping to, fares to zero drives ridership up. We already have data like that, right? We did this with kids, and what do you know? They ride buses more if buses are free.
57% increase.
And I think we found the same with seniors, and I think we found the same as we're rebuilding our ride-on. So if WMATA wanted to move in this direction, I think they would have moved in this direction a while ago. I don't think they're waiting on this kind of data.
Well,
Am I wrong?
Charlie, but WMATA's doing this with this financial support of the district, and we would expect
Right.
the same of a program in Montgomery County, that it would much like you've identified here, would have a financial subsidy associated with the county, because WMATA has no ability to.
District will put in the full subsidy.
That's our expectation, but WMATA has no ability to not collect the fee, as you saw in their budget presentation earlier.
And so the concept, the reason I'm referencing this regional approach is because of the study, how it showed how high the costs are to administer an income-based program on our own. So the goal would be to have others across the region, not necessarily WMATA, but the district and other jurisdictions who see the benefits of having a consistent income-based program so that we don't bear all of the costs of the administration. And it's less confusing.
And we get rid of the border issues, like if you're on New Hampshire Avenue and you are in Prince George's County or Montgomery County and you don't know, and do you pay or not pay? There's a whole lot of complication with having different policies across borders.
Well, let me, if I could, I appreciate the context in which the district is undergoing this process, which is aside from some of the proposals, namely one that Councilmember Charles Allen has championed, right, for a $100 subsidy, just another way to pay for services, right, whether it's a direct subsidy or a subsidy on the Metro card itself to individuals, it serves the same purpose. At the end of the day, we know that access to safe, reliable, and frequent transportation is the best indicator of an individual's economic success. And that is what's going to bear out in that study, because it bears out in all other studies. And so how do we provide that same opportunity here? And for me, it is by reducing the barrier to access. And it has been zero. The fares have been zero for the last 2 years. And not only is that, I think, a good thing for the community as a whole, but it's also a recognition for those who have had to ride the bus to get to work every single day to keep us healthy and safe and keep our food and supplies stocked. And the other data point I think we just need to keep in mind here in Montgomery County is that the average household income is $108,000, but the average household income for a bus rider is $35,000. And so when we think about the social safety net, when we think about providing services and support for those who most need it, they need it at the bus stop. That's where they're at. And I agree that we cannot wait for WMATA all the time. We decided not to wait for WMATA when we're redeveloping or updating and modernizing the White Flint Metro Station or the Bethesda Metro Station. We've made those decisions. And I think we need to continue siding on that side. And so understanding in the list of 10 different fare options, and Dr. Orland, I appreciate the thoughtfulness in all of these options. I would continue to advocate for option number 5, which is free ride-on, and maintain the WMATA, the current WMATA $2 fare, the status quo. And that's what my memo stated. That's what I think is in the best interest of our residents, and that's what I'll support here.
Okay, so I just want to clarify what, Hannah, you were speaking to is your concern if we go to free fares in the county and on WMATA, that free fares are in, would kind of preempt the results of the WMATA study that is underway and potentially have a regional, weaken regional momentum for essentially a means testing strategy. But that's a little bit different than what I was proposing. What I was proposing was that we would go with our first effort here around fares to equalize between WMATA and ride-on at something like $1.25 or maybe $1.50, and then say, to the extent that we have additional revenue, we apply it in a way that will also buy down fares equally on WMATA and ride-on, recognizing that we don't have a lot of money. And the prospects of getting ride-on to free are minimal, and the prospects of getting ride-on and WMATA together for free are minimal. But we would start with the perspective that let's equalize them, and then we can keep this idea of free fares fully in view, and while we await the results of the pilot. And then we can bring everything together with the Ride-On Reimagined study, the WMATA study, and this is sort of an interim posture of what is the lowest fare we can charge to bus riders in the county without treating them differently. And that's really all we're talking about from the first, availability of funding. Is there any, does that present a concern for you?
What I was trying to express is that whatever decision that you make today, that we keep in mind it would be helpful to keep in mind the decision that you make. I'm not recommending one fare or another, but that we maintain that this is an interim decision as we continue to work towards a longer term. So I don't think
Right. So
we're at odds.
From that perspective, a $1.50 fare for both WMATA and Ride-On as an interim posture is not, that is not a concern for that particular issue that you've raised. There could be other concerns about it, but that's not that. So again, executive has proposed, I think, $1 fare, if I understand, just for Ride-On, leaving WMATA alone. I don't think we should do that. I think by all the riders on New Hampshire Avenue, they're paying full fare. All the riders on the queue, we take the queue from Silver Spring to Rockville, one of the highest ridership buses in the whole system. We're building a multi-billion, a huge BRT line just to support that rider base, and yet, we're not providing them with an equitable fare now while we have resources to do that. And I just think we don't have to. We can use our money to support fair equality across the system while we wait for these other decisions to be made. And I guess I would say I'm fine with $1.50. That's and recognizing it's an interim posture. It's an interim posture.
Dr. Rowland, procedurally, would we be able to move various proposals to the rec list to see what our colleagues think?
Well, you're making two sets of recommendations, one having to do with the budget, but one has to do with the fares for the resolution. I think the better way to do it, frankly, is just that each of you on record as to where you are. If there's not agreement amongst the three, if not a 2-to-1, I'd report everybody's position anyway.
Sure, because I do.
And I can have the information for both.
And I do want to publicly express my appreciation to Councilmember Reamer for the thoughtful and pragmatic approach to continuing the long drive to get to where we want to go. I recognize that. I just think now, coming out of the pandemic, given what's happened over the last 2 years, now is the time to make it a reality, and now is the time to keep it permanent. And so just different approaches to it, but they both move in the right direction.
So in other words, what you're saying is you'll stick to your proposal, which is perfectly fine. I've offered an alternative one.
What?
I think you have to cast a vote too.
Well, I think three things. On Hannah's point, I wanted to push back on the assumption, maybe it's just to clarify, it's not even pushing back, it's just to clarify. I think we all understand this. Whatever we do today is interim. Everything we do here is interim, right? We're all going to be dead, and the future councils will reverse everything we're doing. This is absolutely interim. We do what we do without enough data, with the best we can, information we can. We did that with Kids Ride Free. We're doing this during a pandemic now. The pandemic's not totally over, and ridership hasn't recovered. I think it's perfectly understandable that we would stay free for now, with the assumption that economics might change, ridership might change, other things might change in the future, or we might have a regional approach that is more income eligibility, and that would be great too. I'd prefer that rather than subsidizing wealthy bus riders. There aren't many wealthy bus riders. We found that out when we did the study, and it confirmed what we assumed, but if we can have a more targeted approach, I'm for that. I wanted that with our rent relief and other things too. I mean, we have a limited amount of public dollars and we have unmet need as far as the eye can see, and I'd always rather target our limited dollars to the people that need it the most, particularly because we don't have like progressive taxation much at the county level. So I'd prefer to do that in the future, but we don't have that data, and I don't think the lack of that data is a reason that we wouldn't move in that direction in the future. I'm personally for staying free as long as we can, and we'll tranche it, and we'll figure out what we can do in this budget. But if that's had a good impact economically on our writers, which have had a very hard 2 years, and positive impact on our ridership, which I think it has, I think it's been a successful program. So I don't know why we wouldn't try to continue it as long as we could, given our budget realities. On the issue of the fair equity thing, to me that's never made any sense. The idea that, because these residents live in Montgomery County and ride a Metro bus, we have all the responsibility and WMATA doesn't have any responsibility for them, to me is crazy. They are a wealthy agency. They are funded by 3 states and the federal government. Their budget is always limited, and it should be much larger, in my view. But the way to address that problem isn't to subsidize WMATA, essentially, and WMATA riders. The way to do that is to continue to put public pressure on WMATA and work with our federal delegation and others to make sure that they get the revenue that they need so they can do the same thing. I was glad Alexandria moved toward free buses. I was glad we did too. And, I think WMATA should join us rather than, and they never will, if we just pay their share of it. So that's how I view that issue. And while we're all looking for ways to cut the budget, we're very focused on $20 million to restore the OPEB issue, when I don't think we should forget this is a $6 billion budget that has a 7% growth. And so my guess is there's lots of other areas that are growing that we should look to, not just taking away what's been a successful subsidy for our bus riders.
So, Mr. Harker, you're in favor of option 5?
I am.
Okay, good. Moving on. The last thing on this. So we would show this $9.8 million in 12 tranches. Are you okay with that?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. And Mr. Reamer, your proposal will be noted as well in the packet. Then there's a few more items. The Travel Smart Ambassador position, new position. I put on your desk, a more detailed description of it. It should have been in the packet. I left it off inadvertently. But basically, the major focus of the initiative is to reach out to underserved and vulnerable populations, including non-native English speakers, non-native English speakers, like even a native English speaker is having a hard time saying that, seniors and people with disabilities, as well as residents new to the area. It's a new position, so it really can't be hired on until 3 months into the year. So there should be at least a $25,000 reduction that you take here, because they can't fill the position until the beginning of October anyway. And if you wanted to defer the position for another 3 months, that would save another $25,000. So what's your recommendation on that?
Is the Travel Smart Ambassador?
Yeah, as to whether or not to approve it at all. And if you do approve it, I really hardly recommend you at least reduce the cost by $25,000, because they can't hire the person until October anyway. But then the question is whether or not you want to defer it another 3 months and save a second $25,000.
Sorry, you said this, I'm sure, but where is the description? Because the packet says circle XX.
There's a piece of paper on front of you.
Thank you.
Which gets more detail. In the packet itself, there's like a paragraph, but that's more detail.
Aren't there other types of positions like this that exist?
I was
We're
going to
gonna get to
comment
them.
on that if
Yeah.
you had questions about it. We've had some conversation about the Transportation Demand Management Program that does similar work. Its focus has been entirely on the commute trips and the performance of specific transportation management districts. We recognize that that's not the most effective way to have people make choices to not drive, because those trips are important, the commuting type trips are important, but they're not the lion's share of the trips. And this is an effort to get more targeted outreach on people as they're arriving in the community or getting familiar with the community, to make choices in terms of residential location and trip choices that they might not otherwise make if they just default to it. So we're broadening the TDM approach to be a community-wide based approach, not just an employer-based.
Can you give us examples of what those messages would say?
Absolutely. So with the opening of a new residential building, you would go to that building as the people are moving in, maybe 6 months after it opens. You would have information with the leasing information that says, this building offers you the choice to use Metro because it's near Metro, or the bus routes that are available, where they go, when they operate. There would be information about the walking and biking opportunities, the types of infrastructure nearby. That infrastructure is hard to discern if you're not using it. To make all of this more evident, to have on-site, on-person involvement with the community, not just the employer community, but a residential community, so that the trip choices are more evident and people are making the choices we want them to make, not defaulting to what they were doing when they lived somewhere else before they arrived here.
Like the kind of outreach you do at a community fair or something?
Like that, but probably more targeted in specific communities that have different options. So it wouldn't be as broad as what we did at we were at Greenfest, obviously, this weekend. It wouldn't be as broad as a countywide, here's all the bike facilities available countywide. It might be part of it, but if we're in Wheaton, we would talk about the Q bus, which if you don't know what the Q bus does, you may struggle to find that information.
Decipher the website.
And talking to communities that are more difficult to reach than the employer-based communities. And the majority of the trips are not work trips. They're shopping, they're childcare, they're whatever social events you have. Work is important because that happens at the peak of the peak, but that's not the majority of trip making.
But a lot of this would be ongoing, right, at like a farm market or something?
Yeah, it's all ongoing.
Of new buildings is always.
That's not the only element. No, that was just trying to use an example of where you have a population that's going to be very unfamiliar and trying to set their pattern on arrival. So that's the best time to hit somebody or to get in front of somebody and say, you don't know the situation, let me help you understand the situation so that you can make the best choice for you.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I have two other quick examples that are a bit different. So one, so these are things that we're already trying to engage in, but currently don't have the staffing support to do it. So one would be sort of a train the trainer approach, where we work with commercial brokers and realtors to try to get better information out there as they are matching people with where they are going to live, not just at a specific building, but getting information to the influencers of where people end up living, of what the options are at these locations. Another major decision point where people may be willing to change the way they travel around the country is when their children enter a new school. So actually not going to schools and working with the new families as they enter the school to give them better ideas of how they can make their trips around the school as that becomes a new part of their daily life. So you don't have to be new to the county to be in a transition point where you could be influenced on how you travel around the county.
You mentioned TDM, and the chair asked, about, new construction, new apartments, and while you said, Director Conklin, that it's not directed towards that, and Ms. Henn elaborated, I mean, most of the new stuff that is being built is within the CBDs, right? It's transit-oriented development, and toward that end, is there a way to repurpose some of the personnel that are doing this work with TDM, given the nature of commercial and office commutes these days, that maybe just programming them a little bit more towards some of the residential?
I think you bring up a good point, and those staff are fully committed and serving some of this function in those management districts already.
Okay.
This is really to broaden that reach. And we have 6 TMDs, which cover a very small portion of the county. Like, for example, Wheaton is not an active transportation management district. Right. And there's a wealth of opportunity to influence the travel behavior beyond those specific districts, and we can't accomplish that at our current staffing level. This is really trying to, a programmatic component to leveraging return on investment for the pedestrian and bike facilities we're building in the improvement in transit facilities that we have built some of and have a lot planned for construction. And rounding out the T, transportation demand management offering to be all of living rather than commute focused.
So this is slightly off topic, but since you mentioned there are 6 TMDs and we're always looking for ways to save money, has there been any progress made on the suggestion to just have one countywide TMD where you could make proposals and we could allocate as we do every year without having 6 different bank accounts and different staff for each one, et cetera?
We have not moved on that yet, but the regulation has been through the register review process, and that's the step that would follow that. So that's something that's likely coming to you in the relatively near future.
Is it fair to assume that might save you some money too?
Possibly. I mean, there's some long established ways that the current ones are running that are beneficial to the county. With Bethesda is the prime example where you've got Bethesda Transportation Solutions, which is a component of BUP providing that service. So there might be some ability to be more efficient with different districts, but it's not going to be a,
Will you combine
sea change.
Forest Glen with Silver Spring ever?
Forest Glen is, no, that was parking lot districts. Montgomery Hills was combined with Silver Spring, yeah. No transportation management district. in
Correct.
Forest
Yeah,
Glen.
there's no transportation there. Okay.
Yeah.
Take the 25,000 here.
Sure.
Yep.
So what are your druthers on this one?
Take the 25,000.
Sorry?
Sounds good.
We'll take the 25,000.
Okay. Just the first 25,000.
Was there a second? I missed that.
Well, what I was saying was that there's 25,000 you should take automatically because they can't fill a position for 3 months. The question I asked is whether or not you want to defer the hire until January, in which case you could save another 25,000.
I'd be happy to do that myself.
Second.
All right.
We'll do that too.
Mr. Hooker, is that?
I think that's fine.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Does-
I'm sorry, I'm hard to
Does
hear.
that preclude you from advertising for the position?
No.
Fully budgeted? It doesn't, right? You can advertise now. Truth be told, you probably won't hire anybody until January
It
anyway.
takes 6 months anyway.
That's my point, right?
We may delay 3 months on the ad, but yes.
Yes.
Hiring is moving faster than it was.
Good. It could move slower
Did you say it's moving faster than a bus?
than it was.
Faster than it was.
Oh, than it was. Dan was like, wait a second.
The hiring of bus operators is
Faster than a BRT.
Yes, right, okay.
Okay, the next item is a new position for a climate change officer. What happened here was when Mr. Ortiz left, the chief of DEP, director of DEP, Ms. Hochberg is serving now as an acting director of DEP, and her job as assistant CAO was then filled by someone else. The idea is that when there is a full-time DEP director being hired, she would move back to the second floor as the full-time climate change officer. That requires a new position to be filled. The reason why it's showing up here is because it's being funded in several different pots, but 3/4 of the money would come out of DOT's budget. I'm not recommending against it. I'm just pointing out that that's a position that's being created. It's mostly being paid for by DOT's budget. The next item, top page 7, is the service planning position. This is basically helping the folks who plan the routes for ride-on because there's a lot more work happening now, particularly with the development of the Great Seneca Transit Network and also the Ride-On Reimagine study, which is taking a lot of time. Again, this is a new position that was budgeted for a full year, but they can't hire it until October. So same story here as with the other one. The savings here would be $29,370 automatically because you can't hire until 3 months into the year. And if you want to defer till January, it's another $29,370.
I would argue against deferring this one. The needs are very pressing and ongoing work.
Okay.
Just the 3 months of lapse.
Just so the question is whether you cut 3 months or do you cut 6 months? Mr. Tonkin saying don't do 6
Just
months.
3 months.
We need to get this in place as quickly as you all.
I mean,
That's in-
if we don't cut it at all, can you get them faster than 3 months?
Probably not.
Okay, so we'll take 3 months.
Okay. Then the last 2 items were carryovers from the last meeting, which was the what to do about the resurfacing and patching. Again, my recommendation here was to approve only 2/3 of the increase, which is still 90% of the what the executive is recommending. savings of $312,523, and you could put all that on the reconciliation list. And the other item is the same kind of thing for the tree maintenance activities. Approve 2/3 of the increase, doing, again, about 90% of what the executive is recommending, but that would now cut $270,000 from the exec's request. And you want more time to think about those things, so here we are.
Fine with me?
Oh, I'm still for the full request.
Okay, me too.
Mr. Glass?
I'll go along with my colleagues then, but that's
So I couldn't quite hear, but I think you're saying keep
Dumps and potholes, yes,
it all.
yes.
Well, I was actually, I was going to just say the potholes, but I think we could take a savings on the stumps, as much as I hate to say it.
So, Mr. Rimmer, your proposal is to what exactly?
You said council staff recommends adding
2/3 of the increase.
2/3.
you on
I'm with you on the stumps.
Yeah.
And
You
I'm
want
Not just stumps, I'm confused because there's also tree
Tree
planting.
maintenance.
Oh, it's
Yeah,
it's
tree
everything.
maintenance.
The tree maintenance one.
Yeah.
Okay, so, but the Mr. Reamer, Mr. Glass and Mr. Hucker, don't want to make a cut, right?
Right,
Okay.
rather catch up,
But the other one is 3-0.
yes.
That's it.
Okay,
We're going to postpone item 3 till the next meeting.
sounds great.
So Mr. Dice has been very,
Oh,
he's learned a lot about transportation today.
sorry. All right, well, thanks, everyone. Well done. Yeah, we're postponing item 3.
Oh, okay. No, we're not. Item 3 was, item 4 is DGS. It's just item 3, yeah. 4, 5, and 6.
Run for it. Whose side are you on?
I was about to commend your bold leadership and say absolutely.
Second the motion. Oh, I hadn't scrolled down far enough, that's why. Right, Faye.
Do you have any recommendations that are different from the
I'll see you on Wednesday.
All right, thanks, Hannah.
This could be quick. Naeem doesn't have, he just has one small change.
Okay. You thought you
Welcome.
escaped, we pull you back in.
Welcome, Mr. Dice, and your team. Yes. Name, please.
Take it away.
Please, take it away.
Unless you're waiting for some sage remarks from me.
And they did come all the way from MTOC, for most of them.
That's right.
For fleet, the executives are recommending a $4.8 million increase. It is primarily more than almost 95% is going, half of it's going to about fuel costs, and the other half is going to purchasing EV electric vehicles, as well as providing one-time funding for electric vehicle transition plan and covering some costs of electric vehicle chargers. I'm concurring with the executive recommendation for the budget. Only exception is for the 1.8 million for the vehicle replacements, electric vehicle replacements. I'm recommending that be quoted at one time, and that next year we would come back and reevaluate any future vehicle replacements. That will give us time to look at the results of the transition plan and kind of adjust from there.
Sounds good.
This could be the shortest hearing yet, huh? I just wanted to, if I could,
Yeah,
take the
please.
opportunity
You
to
can.
introduce the staff that are here. To my immediate right is Jamie Cook, who's my deputy and chief operating officer and master of logistics. Single-handedly led the county's logistics response to the COVID over the last couple of years.
Yes,
This is
an
the guy who
outstanding
deserves
job.
a round of applause. To my left,
Sincerely.
I had hair before that.
to my immediate left is Calvin Jones, who's the head of our fleet maintenance operation. Calvin brings decades of experience here and is really on point with leading creative approaches to utilization of new vehicles, very intimately involved with manufacturers and the whole industry on alternative fuel vehicles, and my general visionary and strategist in those respects. So Calvin's a great asset. And then sitting, even though we're talking about vehicles, sitting to my far right is Chris Brown, who's the head of our Office of Energy and Sustainability. And Chris deals with not only buildings and keeping the counties on a sustainable track, but also works intimately on the vehicle side with Calvin and all of our other aspects, so that we're keeping track now, better track on data utilization, performance of both vehicles and buildings from an energy sustainability point of view. So here's the team.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome.
So,
Any questions?
offline, I'd like to ask you about my next car. So, because I bought the fleet vehicle for my last car, and it's been awesome. The Ford C-Max.
What a C-Max.
I did. I bought an Energy C-Max.
Okay.
And it's been terrific. I bought it because the county bought it, and I figured it must be a good vehicle. So we got to replace our next one. Great team. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all the expertise that you have. And David, really appreciate your steady work over the years and your leadership. And yeah, Jamie, it was amazing to see you at work during the pandemic. And I don't know, I can't imagine you worked a lot of really long days, and we're grateful for that. And the skill set you had when you came here was just amazingly applied. So thank you for that, and thank you as well. Looking forward to seeing the results of your work here. So thanks.
Like that. Okay, one more item, the utilities, two more items. Utilities budget, CE is recommending a $1.5 million increase. The increase is primarily due to rising utility costs, especially as office county workers are going to return to office. So you're increasing utility usage costs. We also have some new buildings opening, Gray Courthouse, Neville Street Homeless Shelter, and the recently acquired PNC building in Rockville across the street. Those have some additional utility costs associated with them as well. Overall, recommending we approve the executive's recommended budget for utilities NDA.
I thought you might. There's a tradition in this especially at times like these, in this committee of taking 10% of the utilities NDA as savings. Yes, right. And I especially in a year like this, I think would be very prudent. I don't know if my colleagues agree.
I agree. I don't know how you do it, how you make it work, but you've made it work in the past.
See, this is the problem with high performance.
No good job goes unpunished.
Perpetually expected, but I will, if I can say a couple of things about that. Number one, as I have also responded to, this first started with former Chair Berliner, who used to look at me and give me a haircut on this, to which I would respond, when the bill shows up, we're still going to pay it. But we are working hard, and this is again where Chris and his team are working diligently to make buildings more efficient. And we are, as you know, I issued a policy a couple years ago with the executive's concurrence that we will not build any buildings anymore that aren't net zero buildings. So all of the buildings that we're doing currently have planned, and a couple under construction are going to be net zero. We're also looking at Holiday Park Senior Centers are prototype under design right now. Still soon go into construction to convert that to a net zero building, which will be real guidance for the future, because that was quite honestly an old and low performing building. So this is going to be a good test case for what's involved. And we're utilizing all manner of technologies. We're also on the tail end of a study to convert the EOB to see what can be done with the executive office building. It's not going to be as hopeful a turnaround as we would expect. I mean, it's a very large building, very old building, and indicative of some of the challenges we're going to face across the board. But it does present opportunities to explore new technologies, including solar glass on the skins of the building, as well as new lighting systems. Some of the low-hanging fruit, but also exploring some bolder technologies. So I say all of that to say this. We are seeing a drop in consumption and improvement in energy performance for many of our buildings. But we still have an awful lot of buildings that still need a great deal of attention, while we're, in addition to that, adding square footage with new facilities. We've got the South County Aquatic Center that will be coming online, as well as others and aquatic centers, as you know, are energy hogs, despite their efficiency. They're efficient in compared to older natatoriums. So we'll look at this. We're committed, as I think our years of practice demonstrate, to lowering the county's costs for utilities. We've been successful at it, and I can always fire Chris if it doesn't work out. But no, actually, we'll take on the challenge and see what we can do. So thank you.
Like a true patriot.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Last item, motor pool NDA. This fund, NDA appropriates one-time funds each year. So for FY23, C is recommending a little less than $67,000 to fund the purchase of 2 new electric pickup trucks for the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. These would actually replace 2 existing vehicles that are currently in their fleet, and 2 gasoline-powered vehicles. So staff is recommending this, concurring with C's recommendation on that one.
Sounds good.
Right.
Great.
No fossil fuel vehicles.
Exactly. Great.
All right.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for all your good work. And come back more often. Thank you. Yeah, sorry, but I didn't even make the agenda. Wish you could blame me.